the more things I found in Scripture that really matched up with the Catholic faith. And the turning point probably came one day in August of 1991 when I was reading a Catholic book, and there was an extended quotation from Matthew 16, which is the "You are Peter" passage. And as I read this passage, I typically to this point said what many evangelicals say, which is that Peter is not the rock, but that the rock on which the church is built is Peter's faith, the revelation of the fact that Jesus is the Messiah. And I had assumed in this passage that Jesus was diminishing Peter, saying, "You're not important, Peter. The real important thing is who I am as Christ." Well, as I read the passage on this day, I noticed certain structural features in the text that required me to say that Peter's the rock. And as soon as I saw them, it was locked in place. I realized it had to be. And so I did an about face on the interpretation of that passage, and just in a moment, and said, this is it. This is crystal clear. It has to be Peter. And as a result of that,
maybe better give us
sure,
that detail.
No problem.
Because I think it is interesting what you discovered.
What I noticed was that in this passage, Jesus makes three statements to Peter. The first statement he makes begins, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah." The second statement is, "You are Peter," begins that way. And the third statement begins, "I give you the keys to the kingdom." Now, what I noticed is that the first statement, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah," is clearly a blessing. The third statement, "I give you the keys," is also clearly a blessing. And so if we're going to interpret "You are Peter" in its immediate context, then we're going to have to say that "You are Peter" is also a blessing. So Jesus is...
It would be inconsistent to bless them and then
Exactly.
put them down.
Exactly. It would be like saying, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah. You're really insignificant. Here are the keys to the kingdom." It just wouldn't scan. And so I had to conclude that what the linguists were saying was right. Now, sometimes, Protestants will say, well, there's a different word in Greek here. He's saying, "You are Petros, and on this Petra I will build my church." And that's true. But what they will sometimes argue is that Petros means small stone, whereas Petra means large rock, and so he's contrasting Peter with the rock. Well, if he had said that in Greek about 600 or 700 years earlier, it would have carried that meaning. In some early Greek poetry, they did have that meaning. But, as D.A. Carson, who's one of the deans of Protestant biblical exegesis, admits, by the first century, the terms had lost that meaning. They were synonyms. And so you really can't drive a wedge between them in that way. So I realized that because it's in a context of blessing, the middle statement, "You are Peter," also has to be a blessing. And so he's not running Peter down and contrasting him with the rock. I also noticed that each one of these three statements has a continuation which explains it. So for the statement, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah," the continuation is, "For flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven." That explains why he's blessed, because the Father has revealed this to him. Similarly, in the third statement, "I give you the keys," the continuation and explanation is, "Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." That explains part of what it means to have the keys. So in the same way, with the middle statement, "You are Peter," the continuation of that, "And on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it," that explains what it means to be Peter. To be Peter means to be the rock on which the church is built. And so I had to conclude, wow, if Catholics were right about that, they could be right about other things. And so I had to conduct a survey over the course of a year of all of the different areas of systematic theology, looking at them for the first time, really, with an open mind to the Catholic position. When I did, the verses came back down off the shelf, and I said, Jesus meant what he said, and I have to become a Catholic.
That last part of your journey in is very moving. I don't know if you want to get into it.
Be happy to. I hid what I was doing religiously from my wife for a while, because